The morning sun rose over New Eden like it had for the past 30 years. Golden light spread across endless fields of wheat and corn. The air smelled of fresh earth and growing things. Children ran through the streets of Haven City, laughing, as they chased each other to school. Their parents worked in the farms or labs, building something beautiful on this distant world. New Eden was humanity's greatest success story among the stars. Over 2 million people called this place home. They had turned a dead rock into a garden. Rivers flowed where there had been only dust. Trees grew tall where nothing had lived before. The colonists were proud of what they had built with their own hands. Maria Santos walked through her wheat field as she did every morning. The plants swayed in the gentle breeze. She could see her neighbor Tom checking his corn crop next door. Further away, the research station's white buildings gleamed in the sunlight. Scientists there worked on new ways to grow food and help other worlds bloom like New Eden had. The colony exported food to dozens of worlds, human worlds, alien worlds. It did not matter to the people of New Eden. Hungry people needed food, and they had plenty to share. They were proud of their reputation. As the galaxy's breadbasket, ships came from across known space to buy their crops and seeds. High above the planet, something dark moved between the stars. Dr. James Park was working in his lab when the first alarm sounded. He looked up from his plant samples, confused. The warning tone was for space traffic, but no ships were scheduled to arrive today. He walked to the window and looked up at the sky. His blood turned cold. Massive ships hung in the blue sky like black storm clouds. They were unlike anything he had ever seen. The hulls looked alive, covered in what appeared to be scales or armor plating. Strange fins and spines jutted from their sides. These were not human ships. The communication system crackled to life across the colony. A harsh, alien voice filled the air. It spoke in perfect human English, but the accent was wrong, cold, threatening. Humans of New Eden, you have been judged. Your species spreads like a disease across the galaxy. Your influence corrupts the natural order. This ends now. Maria dropped her sample basket. The wheat stalks around her began to bend and sway, but not from any wind. The air itself was getting hot. Very hot. All human expansion beyond your designated zone is forbidden. This colony is an illegal settlement. You have 30 minutes to evacuate. Any who remain will burn with your stolen world. In Haven City, people poured out of buildings and looked up at the alien fleet. Some screamed, others stood frozen in shock. Parents grabbed their children and ran toward the spaceport where the evacuation ships waited. But 30 minutes was not enough time, not for 2 million people. The first attack came without warning. Beams of superheated plasma rained down from the alien ships. Where they touched the ground, everything simply vanished. Not burned or destroyed. Gone. As if it had never existed at all. The wheat fields that Maria had tended for 15 years disappeared in seconds. The earth beneath them turned to glass. Maria ran. Around her, the air filled with the screams of dying plants and animals. The very atmosphere caught fire. She could see the spaceport ahead, but more plasma beams swept across the ground between her and safety. Dr. Park and his team tried to save their research. 30 years of work on crop genetics and terraforming technology. Seeds that could grow on any world. Knowledge that could feed the galaxy. They loaded what they could into transport containers, but the building shook as another beam struck. Nearby. "Leave it," shouted Dr. Lisa Chen, grabbing Park's arm. "We have to go now." They ran from the lab as the roof collapsed behind them. The evacuation ships at the spaceport were taking off as fast as they could be loaded. But there were not enough ships, not nearly enough. The aliens had planned this perfectly. Their fleet surrounded the planet. Every escape route was blocked. When the first evacuation ship tried to run, alien fighters swooped down like metal birds of prey. The human ship exploded in a ball of fire and debris. More ships tried to escape. Most were destroyed before they could reach hyperspace. A few, badly damaged, managed to jump away with hull breaches and failing life support. They carried only a few hundred survivors between them. Admiral Kethvar watched the destruction from his command ship. He was Saurix, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. His people had been traveling between stars when humans were still discovering fire. The reptilian admiral's eyes were cold as he observed the burning world below. "Status report," he hissed. "To his aid. 97% of the human infrastructure destroyed, Admiral. Population centers eliminated. Evacuation attempts mostly neutralized. Less than 300 humans escaped." Kethvar nodded his massive head. "Good. Record a message for transmission to Earth. Let them know what happens when they ignore our warnings." The message probe launched toward human space would take 3 weeks to arrive. It contained footage of New Eden's destruction and a simple message: "Your expansion ends here. Withdraw to your designated worlds or face total annihilation. You have 30 days to comply." But the Admiral had made one crucial mistake. He thought humans would react like every other species the Coalition had conquered. He expected fear, submission, and surrender. He did not understand humans at all. On the surface of New Eden, the destruction continued for 3 days. The aliens were thorough. Every farm, every building, every sign that humans had ever lived here was erased. The rivers ran red with ash. The forests that had taken decades to grow were reduced to smoldering stumps. When they were finished, the world looked much as it had before humans arrived. Dead, empty, lifeless. The alien fleet prepared to depart. Their mission was complete. The humans had been taught their place in the galactic order. Other species would see what happened to those who challenged the Coalition's authority. Admiral Kethvar stood on his command deck and looked down at the ruined world one last time. "Set course for Hegemony Prime," he ordered. "Our work here is done." The Coalition fleet vanished into hyperspace, leaving only ash and silence behind. But among the ruins, something survived. Hidden in deep caves and underground shelters, a few thousand humans had managed to escape the orbital bombardment. They emerged into a world of devastation, their homes gone, their families dead or scattered across the galaxy. Sarah Mitchell crawled out of Mineshaft 7, where she and 40 others had hidden for 3 days. The sky above was black with ash. The air tasted of smoke and death. Where her family's farm had stood, there was only a crater of melted glass. She fell to her knees and wept. For her husband and children who had been in town when the attack began. For her neighbors and friends. For the beautiful world they had built together. But as she cried, something else grew inside her chest. Something hot and terrible and absolutely human. Rage. The surviving humans worked together to repair one of the damaged communication arrays. It took 2 weeks of scavenging parts from the ruins, but they finally managed to send a message toward Earth. The message was simple. New Eden is gone. They killed everyone. Tell Earth what they did to us. Make them pay. That message would reach Earth 2 days before the Coalition's ultimatum arrived. When the people of Earth saw the footage of their burned colony and dead children, they would understand that this was not just an attack on New Eden, it was an attack on all humanity. And humanity was about to show the galaxy exactly what that meant. In the depths of space, the fastest human courier ship raced toward Earth at maximum speed. Its captain, Elena Vasquez, had been one of the few evacuation ships to escape New Eden's destruction. Her ship was damaged and her crew was exhausted, but they carried something more precious than their own lives. They carried the truth. The footage of the attack was stored in the ship's computers. The screams of the dying, the laughter of alien pilots as they hunted fleeing evacuation ships, the cold voice of Admiral Kethvar as he ordered the total destruction of everything humans had built. Elena stared out at the stars ahead. Earth was still 6 days away, but she could already imagine what would happen when her message arrived. The politicians would be shocked. The military would be angry. The people would demand action. But would it be enough? The Coalition was vast and powerful. They had been conquering worlds when humanity was still figuring out how to make fire. Their technology was advanced beyond human understanding. Their fleets outnumbered human ships 1,000 to 1. What could Earth possibly do against such overwhelming power? Elena had no way of knowing that she was about to witness something the galaxy had never seen before. The awakening of humanity's true nature. Not as explorers or farmers or peaceful traders, as the most dangerous predators. In the galaxy, the Coalition had made only one mistake, but it was a big one. They had made humans angry. Very, very angry. Earth's awakening. The message from New Eden arrived at Earth Defense Command at 0347 hours on a Tuesday morning. Commander Janet Price was drinking her third cup of coffee when her communication officer called out across the quiet command center. "Ma'am, we're receiving a priority message from New Eden. The signal is weak and breaking up." Price walked over to the communication station. New Eden was one of humanity's most successful colonies. They rarely sent priority messages unless something was seriously wrong. "Put it on the main screen." The holographic display flickered to life. Elena Vasquez's face appeared, but she looked terrible. Her uniform was torn and stained with blood. Behind her, sparks flew from damaged equipment. The ship she was on was clearly in bad shape. "Earth Defense Command, this is Captain Elena Vasquez of the merchant vessel Freedom's Dawn. I am the only evacuation ship to escape New Eden." Her voice cracked. "The colony is gone. Everyone is dead. We have footage of the attack. Alien forces. They just burned everything. Everyone." The transmission cut to shaky camera footage. Commander Price watched in growing horror as alien ships rained fire down on peaceful farms. She saw people running and screaming. She saw children falling as plasma beams cut them down. She saw the beautiful forests of New Eden turning to ash. The command center fell completely silent. "How many survivors?" Price asked quietly. "Maybe 300 made it off-world. 2 million people lived on New Eden. They're all—" Elena couldn't finish the sentence. The transmission ended. Price stood staring at the blank screen for a long moment. Around her, officers and technicians stared in shock. Finally, she turned to her communications officer. "Get me President Chen, now. And wake up everyone in the Defense Council. Tell them we have a situation." 30 minutes later, President Chen Wei-Ming sat in the emergency situation room deep beneath Geneva. Around the table were the most powerful people on Earth. Defense Secretary Marcus Torres, Admiral Sarah Morrison, just recalled from retirement, Director James Kim of Earth Intelligence, Dr. Rachel Hayes from the Science Council. They watched Elena's footage in complete silence. When it ended, no one spoke for several minutes. President Chen was the first to break the silence. "How long until Captain Vasquez arrives?" 6 days, Admiral Morrison replied. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking slightly. "Sir, I've been fighting wars for 40 years. I've seen a lot of terrible things. But this is genocide, pure and simple." "Do we know who did this?" Defense Secretary Torres asked. Director Kim consulted his tablet. "Intelligence suggests it was the Hegemony Coalition. 4 alien species that control about 60% of known space. They've been concerned about human expansion for some time." "Concerned?" Dr. Hayes laughed, but there was no humor in it. "They murdered 2 million civilians, men, women, and children." President Chen studied the faces around the table. These were good people, smart people, people who had dedicated their lives to protecting humanity and keeping peace in the galaxy. But he could see something changing in their eyes as they processed what they had witnessed. "Recommendations?" he asked. Torres spoke first. "We need to mobilize the fleet immediately. Every ship we have." "That's maybe 2,000 vessels," Morrison said. "The Coalition has tens of thousands." "Then we build more ships," Dr. Hayes said firmly. "As many as we need." Kim shook his head. "The Coalition is offering us terms. Withdraw to 12 designated worlds and they'll let us live. Maybe we should consider—" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Every eye turned to Director Kim. Admiral Morrison's voice was very quiet when she spoke. "Director, did you just suggest that we surrender to the people who burned our children alive?" Kim realized his mistake immediately. "No, of course not. I just meant we should consider all options The only option, President Chen said firmly, is making them pay for what they've done. 2 days later, Elena Vasquez's ship limped into Earth orbit. The footage she carried was immediately broadcast across every human world and station. The reaction was instant and overwhelming. Riots broke out on a dozen worlds as humans demanded immediate action. Veterans who had not worn uniforms in decades showed up at recruitment centers. Factory workers volunteered to work double shifts to build weapons. Even the peaceful colonies on the outer rim sent messages pledging support for whatever Earth decided to do. But the most important reaction came from an unexpected source. Admiral Sarah Morrison had been retired for 5 years, tending a small garden on her ranch in Montana. She was watching the news reports when her grandson Tommy came running into the room. "Grandma Sarah, they showed pictures from New Eden at school today. Teacher said bad aliens hurt a lot of people." Morrison pulled the 8-year-old boy onto her lap. "Yes, sweetheart. Some very bad people did some very bad things. Are they going to hurt us too?" Morrison looked into her grandson's innocent eyes and felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. "No, Tommy, they're not going to hurt anyone ever again." That evening she called President Chen personally. "Sir, I want back in. Full active duty. Whatever you need me to do." "Sarah, you've earned your retirement. You don't have to—" "Mr. President," Morrison interrupted. "They killed our children, all of them. I've spent 50 years learning how to fight wars. It's time to put that knowledge to use." The next morning, Morrison stood before the joint session of the Global Defense Council. Representatives from every human world and colony had gathered, either in person or by hologram. The great hall buzzed, with angry voices demanding action. Morrison walked to the podium. The room fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen, we face the greatest threat in human history, an enemy that believes we can be intimidated into submission through the murder of innocents. They are wrong." She activated a holographic display showing the galaxy. Red markers indicated coalition territories. Blue showed human space. They outnumber us 10 to 1. Their technology is more advanced. Their fleets are larger. By every military calculation, we should surrender immediately. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Morrison's voice grew harder. But they made one crucial mistake. They assume we think like them. That we value our own lives more than justice. That we will trade our freedom for temporary safety. The display changed, showing footage from New Eden's burning fields. They don't understand humans at all. We are the species that crossed oceans in wooden boats, that climbed mountains because they were there, that kept fighting when every rational calculation said we should give up. The room was completely silent now. I propose Operation Warbringer, total mobilization of human space. Every shipyard, every factory, every resource we have. We're going to build the largest military fleet in galactic history, and then we're going to use it. Secretary Torres stood up. "Admiral, even if we could build such a fleet, it would take years, maybe decades." Morrison smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Secretary, you're thinking like a human from the old Earth. Comfortable, peaceful, safe." She gestured toward the New Eden footage. "That human doesn't exist anymore. They burned him up, with our colonies." She turned back to the assembly. "We have 6 months. 6 months to build 800,000 warships. 6 months to train the crews. 6 months to prepare for total war." The Brazilian representative raised his hand. "Admiral, that's impossible. We don't have the resources or the industrial capacity." "Then we'll build it," Morrison cut him off. "Every asteroid mine becomes a shipyard. Every factory becomes an armory. Every human becomes a soldier." The room erupted in debate. Some representatives argued it was impossible. Others worried about the cost. A few questioned whether such a massive military buildup was morally right. President Chen called for order. When the room quieted, he stood and looked around at the assembled representatives. "The coalition has given us 30 days to surrender. They believe we will submit like every other species they have conquered." His voice grew stronger. "They're about to learn that humans are not like other species. Motion to approve Operation Warbringer." The vote was not even close. Every single human world voted yes. Within hours, the largest industrial mobilization in human history began. On Earth, massive construction ships headed for the asteroid belt to begin building new shipyards. On Mars, the great factories switched from manufacturing civilian goods to military hardware. On Europa, scientists began working around the clock to develop new weapons and defensive systems. But perhaps the most important changes were happening in the hearts and minds of humanity itself. The peaceful traders and farmers and scientists who had spread across the galaxy were remembering something their ancestors had always known. Sometimes, the only way to preserve peace is to prepare for war. And sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to hit back harder than they hit you. The coalition had wanted to teach humanity a lesson about their place in the galactic order. They were about to get an education they would never forget. Admiral Morrison stood in the observation deck of Earth's largest orbital shipyard, watching the construction of the first Warbringer-class vessel. The ship was massive, bristling with weapons and armor. It looked nothing like the peaceful exploration ships humans had been building for decades. It looked like exactly what it was designed to be, an instrument of war. Behind her, President Chen approached. "Sarah, are you sure about this? Once we start down this path, there's no going back." Morrison continued watching the construction. Sparks flew as workers attached the ship's main gun arrays. Each weapon was powerful enough to crack a moon. "Mr. President, they already chose our path for us when they burned New Eden. We can either lie down and die, or we can fight back." She turned to face him. "Personally, I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees." Chen nodded slowly. 800,000 ships, it's an enormous gamble. "Yes, sir. But it's not really about the ships. It's about what those ships represent. When the coalition sees our fleet coming, they'll understand something very important about humans." "What's that?" Morrison's smile was cold as space. "We don't forget, we don't forgive, and we never, ever give up." Outside the observation window, the first Warbringer took shape against the stars. Soon, there would be hundreds of thousands, more, all carrying the same message to humanity's enemies. Remember New Eden, the forging of the Warbringers. The first Warbringer-class battleship rolled out of Earth's Titan shipyard exactly 97 days after the New Eden massacre. Admiral Morrison stood on the observation platform, watching the massive vessel emerge from the construction bay like a steel mountain coming to life. The ship was beautiful in the way that a shark is beautiful. Every line was designed for killing. The hull stretched over 2 kilometers from nose to tail, covered in armor plating that could absorb direct hits from planetary defense cannons. Weapon ports dotted its surface like the eyes of some ancient predator. "First of 800,000, said Dr. Elena Vasquez, joining Morrison at the viewing window. The former merchant captain now wore the uniform of Earth's new intelligence division. "Hard to believe we're really going to build them all." Morrison smiled grimly. "We'll build them. The question is whether we can crew them all." That was the real challenge. Building ships was just a matter of resources and time. Training the people to operate them was far more difficult. Each Warbringer needed a crew of 1,500. That meant humanity needed to train over 1 billion new soldiers in just a few months. The solution came from an unexpected source. Dr. James Park, one of the few scientists to escape New Eden, had been working on something called neural interface technology. Before the attack, he had used it to help farmers communicate directly with their automated equipment. Now, he proposed adapting it for military use. "Imagine a pilot who can think directly to his ship," he explained to the assembled military leadership. "A gunner who doesn't need to aim because the computer reads his intentions. A navigator who feels the gravitational fields around him like physical sensations." The technology was dangerous. Early test subjects experienced severe headaches, memory loss, and in a few cases, complete psychological breakdown. But volunteers kept coming forward anyway. Young men and women who had seen the footage from New Eden and decided that any risk was worth taking if it meant fighting back. Lieutenant Marcus Chen was one of the first successful neural interface pilots. The 24-year-old had lost his sister in the New Eden attack. She had been a teacher there, working with young children. When he jacked into his fighter's computer system for the first time, he felt the ship become part of his body. "It's incredible," he reported to Dr. Park after his first test flight. "I don't fly the ship. I am the ship. I can feel the engine vibrations in my bones. I know exactly where every other craft is around me without looking." The neural interface technology cut training time from months to weeks, but it also changed the pilots in fundamental ways. They became something new, something that was part human and part machine, something perfectly designed for war. Meanwhile, other scientists worked on developing weapons that would give humanity an edge against coalition technology. The enemy's shields were too strong for conventional weapons. Their armor was too thick for normal missiles. Their ships were too fast for human targeting systems. Dr. Rachel Hayes led the weapons development team. She had been a peaceful researcher, before New Eden, working on clean energy solutions. Now she devoted her considerable intellect to finding new ways to kill. "The coalition shields work by deflecting energy," she explained to Admiral Morrison during a demonstration. "They're very good at stopping lasers, plasma bolts, that sort of thing. But they have trouble with matter that phases in and out of normal space." She activated a test chamber where a miniature coalition shield protected a metal target. Then she fired what looked like an ordinary missile at it. The projectile passed right through the shield as if it wasn't there, then exploded. "Inside the protected area, quantum torpedoes," Hayes said proudly. "They exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. By the time the shield recognizes them as a threat, they're already inside the protected zone." The demonstration impressed Morrison, but she wanted something more devastating. "That's good for ship-to-ship combat. What about planetary bombardment?" Hayes smiled in a way that would have frightened her former colleagues. "I've been working on something special for that. We're calling them Geneva Protocols." The name was intentionally ironic. Before the war, humanity had banned certain weapons as too inhumane for use against other humans. But the coalition wasn't human. And after what they had done to New Eden, humanity's moral restraints had largely disappeared. The Geneva Protocols were nanomachines designed to consume any organic matter they encountered. A single warhead could sterilize an entire continent in hours. The microscopic machines would eat through any biological defense, reproduce exponentially, then self-destruct once their programmed targets were eliminated. "We tested them on some captured coalition bioships," Hayes reported. "The weapons worked perfectly, too perfectly maybe. Watching those ships just dissolve, it was disturbing even for us." Morrison nodded grimly. "Good. I want the coalition to be disturbed. I want them to be terrified. I want them to understand exactly what they unleashed when they decided to murder our children." The Psychological Warfare Division, led by Colonel James Washington, took a different approach to preparing for the coming conflict. Instead of developing new weapons, they studied the enemy's minds. "Every species has fears," Washington explained to his team. "Things that trigger primal terror responses. We need to find out what scares each coalition race, and then use that against them." The research was disturbing but necessary. They learned that the reptilian saurics feared fire above all else. Something in their ancient evolution made flames trigger panic responses even in their most disciplined soldiers. The insectoid hive mind species could be disrupted by certain frequency patterns that interfered with their collective consciousness. The crystalline shapers became confused and disoriented when exposed to chaotic electromagnetic fields. But the most effective psychological weapon was simpler than any of those tricks. It was the truth. "We're going to broadcast the death screams from New Eden on every frequency the coalition uses," Washington announced. "Every time they try to communicate, they'll hear the voices of the people they murdered. Every time they plot their next move, they'll be reminded of what they did." The effect on coalition morale would prove devastating. Most alien soldiers had never questioned their leaders' propaganda about human aggression. They had been told that humanity was dangerous and needed to be contained. They had not been told about the farms and schools and hospitals their fleets had destroyed. While the weapons and ships took shape, humanity's intelligence network spread across coalition space. Captain Lisa Jung led a fleet of disguised merchant vessels that mapped every enemy stronghold and defensive position. The work was incredibly dangerous. If caught, the human spies would face torture and execution. But they volunteered anyway, driven by the same rage that motivated everyone else in human space. Jung's ship, disguised as a cargo hauler, docked at the Coalition naval base at Proxima Station. Her crew pretended to be traders selling exotic foods while their hidden sensors recorded everything. Guard rotations, ship movements, weapons placements, communication protocols. The base has about 50,000 personnel, she reported back to Earth via encrypted transmission. Mostly Sorik's naval forces, but with significant Hive support units. Defense grid includes particle beam platforms and fighter squadrons. Estimated response time to alert condition, 4 minutes. That information would prove crucial when human forces arrived to destroy the base. 6 months after New Eden's destruction, the Coalition sent another ultimatum to Earth. Admiral Cathvar himself delivered the message, still convinced that humans would eventually submit to superior force. "Your time is almost up," his reptilian face snarled from every human communication screen. "Submit now, and we will allow your species to survive on the 12 designated worlds. Continue this futile resistance, and we will do to Earth what we did to your illegal colony." The response came not from President Chen or Admiral Morrison, but from an ordinary farmer named Tom Bradley. He had lost his brother on New Eden. Now he worked 18 hours a day in a weapons factory, building missiles that would carry humanity's vengeance to the stars. "My brother grew the best corn in the galaxy," Tom said, looking directly into the camera. "He never hurt anyone. He just wanted to feed people. You burned him alive along with everyone else on New Eden." Tom held up one of the quantum torpedoes he had helped build. "This is for my brother. This is for every child you murdered. This is for every dream you destroyed. We're coming for you. All of us. And we're bringing 800,000 reasons why you should have left us alone." The message was broadcast across human space and intercepted by Coalition intelligence. Admiral Cathvar watched it with growing unease. The human's voice carried something the reptilian commander had never heard before in a defeated species. Absolute certainty. As the Coalition deadline approached, humanity's war machine reached full capacity. Every day, dozens of new warbringers emerged from shipyards across human space. Every day, thousands of new pilots completed their neural interface training. Every day, the weapon stockpiles grew larger and more deadly. The ships were not just vessels of war, they were monuments to human determination. Each one carried the names of New Eden's victims engraved on its hull. Each one flew a battle flag showing the burning wheat fields where children had played. Each one broadcast a simple message on all frequencies. Remember New Eden. Admiral Morrison stood in the command center of her flagship, the UES Vengeance. Around her, holographic displays showed the positions of the assembled human fleet. 800,000 ships of war, crewed by humanity's finest and angriest warriors. It was the largest military force in galactic history. More ships than the Coalition had faced in 1,000 years of conquest. More firepower than had ever been assembled in one place. And every single weapon was pointed at the aliens who had dared to murder human children. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender offers from 17 different Coalition systems. They're asking for terms." Morrison's expression didn't change. "Tell them we don't negotiate with child murderers. They'll get the same mercy they showed New Eden." "Which is none at all," her tactical officer added grimly. "Exactly." Morrison turned to address her bridge crew. "Gentlemen, ladies, we have spent 6 months preparing for this moment. 6 months building the tools of vengeance. 6 months getting ready to teach the galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity's children." She activated the fleet-wide communication system. Throughout human space, 800,000 ships received her words simultaneously. "Today, we begin the journey to justice. Today we start the long road to making our enemies pay for what they've done. Today we show the galaxy that humans do not forget, do not forgive, and do not give up. The response was immediate. Across the vast fleet, crews cheered and weapon systems powered up. Engine drives ignited like newborn stars. The largest military force in galactic history began to move. "Set course for Coalition space," Morrison ordered. "All ships, maximum speed. It's time to collect the debt they owe us." The human fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying death and vengeance to the aliens who had thought they could intimidate humanity into submission. Behind them, Earth's shipyards continued working, building even more ships for the war that was about to begin. The Coalition had wanted to teach humanity about galactic power. They were about to learn that humans were very good students, and even better teachers. The Stormbreak's Admiral Kethvar stood in the command center of his flagship, studying tactical displays that showed Coalition defensive positions across 47 star systems. His reptilian features showed confidence as he reviewed the deployment of his forces. "The humans are coming," his aide reported nervously. "Our long-range sensors detect a large fleet approaching the outer systems." Kethvar's throat sacs inflated with what passed for laughter among his people. How large? A few thousand ships? Perhaps 5,000 in their desperation? "Sir, the sensor readings are unusual. The computer estimates somewhere between 700,000 and 800,000 vessels." The command center fell silent. Kethvar turned slowly to stare at his aide. "Run the sensors again, that cannot be correct." The aide's claws clicked nervously against his control panel as he rechecked the readings. "Sir, I've run the scan 17 times. The human fleet appears to contain approximately 800,000 warships of unknown classification." For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Kethvar felt something cold settle in his stomach. The Coalition's entire military force numbered perhaps 100,000 ships spread across 60 star systems. How could the humans have built such a massive fleet in only 6 months? "Impossible," he whispered. "No species has that kind of industrial capacity." He was about to learn that humans were not like other species. The first attack came without warning. Commander Sarah Kim's strike group dropped out of hyperspace directly above the Coalition mining station at Wolf 359. 50 Warbringer-class battleships materialized in perfect formation, their quantum torpedo tubes already locked onto target. The station's defenders had perhaps 30 seconds to react. It was not enough. The first salvo of quantum torpedoes phased through the station's shields as if they didn't exist. The weapons materialized inside the structure itself, detonating with the force of small suns. The mining platform, which had stood for over 2 centuries, simply ceased to exist. The attack on Wolf 359 was repeated simultaneously across 46 other Coalition systems. Human forces struck everywhere at once, giving the enemy no time to coordinate defenses or call for reinforcements. Admiral Morrison's strategy was brutally simple: hit hard, hit fast, and hit everywhere. At Kepler Station, the largest Coalition naval base in the sector, Admiral Morrison herself led the assault. Her flagship, the UES Vengeance, emerged from hyperspace at the head of 10,000 Warbringers. The sight should have been impossible. No fleet that large had ever operated as a single unit. The station's commander, a Saurix admiral named Thekmore, stared at his sensor displays in disbelief. "All defensive units, attack formation. Launch all fighters. Signal the home fleet for immediate reinforcement." But the Coalition had spent centuries conquering weaker species. They were not prepared for an enemy that matched their technology and exceeded their numbers. The battle for Kepler Station lasted exactly 14 minutes. The Coalition's bioships, living vessels grown rather than built, attempted their traditional ramming tactics. For centuries, the sight of massive organic ships charging directly at enemy formations had broken enemy morale. The ships were designed to crush smaller vessels through sheer mass and regenerative armor. They had never faced quantum-hardened, human hulls. Lieutenant Marcus Chen, his consciousness merged with his fighter's computer systems, watched through his ship's sensors as a Coalition biocruiser tried to ram his squadron. The alien vessel was over 3 kilometers long, its living hull bristling with defensive spines and biocannons. Chen didn't even try to dodge. Instead, he activated his ship's new molecular disruptor field. The bioship struck Chen's fighter at full speed. Instead of crushing the smaller human vessel, the alien ship simply dissolved. Its living tissue broke down at the molecular level, reduced to component atoms in seconds. What had been a mighty warship became a cloud of organic particles. Chen flew through the expanding debris field without slowing down. Ramming attack neutralized, he reported calmly to his squadron leader, continuing to primary target. Across the battle zone, similar scenes played out as coalition forces discovered that their traditional tactics were useless against human technology. The Hive's swarm fighters, which relied on overwhelming numbers and collective coordination, found themselves facing human nanofighter clouds that adapted and multiplied faster than biological reflexes could respond. Dr. Rachel Hayes watched the battle reports from her laboratory on Earth. Her quantum torpedoes were performing exactly as designed, phasing through enemy shields to detonate inside coalition ships. But it was her other creation that truly terrified the enemy. The Geneva Protocols had been deployed on 3 coalition worlds. The nanomachines designed to consume any organic matter they encountered were working with horrifying efficiency. Entire planetary ecosystems were dissolving as the microscopic weapons spread across continents. Status report from Saurix Prime. Her assistant reported quietly. Hayes reviewed the data with scientific detachment. Organic dissolution proceeding at expected rate. Estimated completion in 6 hours. The nanites are self-destructing on schedule after consuming all targeted biological matter. The assistant, a young woman who had lost family on New Eden, nodded grimly. Good. Maybe now they'll understand how we felt watching our worlds burn. But the most devastating weapon in humanity's arsenal was not technological. It was psychological. Colonel James Washington's Psychological Warfare Division had infiltrated coalition communication networks. Every time alien forces tried to coordinate their defenses, they heard the screams and final messages from New Eden's dying colonists, broadcast on all frequencies. The effect on coalition morale was immediate and catastrophic. Most alien soldiers had been told they were fighting dangerous human aggressors. They had not been told about the children in the schoolyards or the farmers in their fields. They had not been told about the research stations dedicated to feeding hungry worlds. Listening to those voices, many coalition crews began to understand what their leaders had really done. Entire squadrons surrendered rather than continue fighting for a cause they no longer believed in. Commander Zhelkas of the Hive Collective felt his squadron's shared consciousness fracturing as the human broadcasts continued. The dying voices of human children created resonance patterns that disrupted the mental links between his ships. His pilots, suddenly isolated from the collective mind that had guided them since birth, panicked and fled in all directions. Cannot maintain formation, he signaled desperately to the fleet command. Human psychological weapons disrupting collective consciousness, requesting immediate withdrawal. But there would be no withdrawal. Not for any coalition force caught in the path of humanity's vengeance. The battle that would define the war took place at Hegemony Prime, the coalition's capital world. Admiral Kethavar had gathered the largest fleet in coalition history to defend the seat of their government. Over 80,000 ships surrounded the planet, including the Admiral's personal command ship, the bio-dreadnought Apex Predator. The massive vessel was over 5 kilometers long, grown from living tissue over the course of decades. It was the most powerful ship in coalition space, armed with weapons that could shatter moons and protected by regenerative armor that could heal battle damage in real time. Admiral Morrison arrived with 200,000 warbringers. The final battle began with a transmission from the human fleet. Morrison's face appeared on every coalition communication screen throughout the system. Behind her, the bridge of the UES Vengeance hummed with quiet efficiency. Admiral Kethavar, she said, her voice carrying across space to the coalition forces. You remember me? Sarah Morrison, formerly retired, currently very angry. 6 months ago, you murdered 2 million civilians on New Eden. You burned children alive. You destroyed schools and hospitals and farms, On his command deck, Kethavar felt his blood turn cold as he stared at the human admiral's face. There was something in her eyes that he had never seen before, something that promised violence beyond anything he could imagine. "You wanted to teach humanity about power," Morrison continued. "Consider this your education." The human fleet opened fire. 200,000 quantum torpedo launchers fired simultaneously. The space around Hegemony Prime lit up like a new star, as millions of phased weapons materialized inside coalition ships. The enemy's shields, designed to stop energy weapons, were useless against attacks that bypassed normal space entirely. The coalition fleet tried to return fire, but their formations were already breaking apart as ships dissolved around them. The bioship's regenerative armor was no defense against weapons that attacked at the molecular level. Living tissue that had taken decades to grow was reduced to component atoms in seconds. Admiral Kethavar watched his fleet die around him. 80,000 ships, the pride of coalition space, were being systematically annihilated by human weapons that seemed to mock every law of physics he understood. "All ships, ramming speed," he ordered desperately. "Close with the human fleet. Use our mass advantage." The Apex Predator, largest ship in coalition space, accelerated toward Morrison's flagship. The bio-dreadnought's living hull writhed with combat anticipation as it prepared to crush the human command ship. Morrison watched the massive alien vessel approaching on her tactical display. "Helm, maintain current position. Do not evade." Her crew looked at her in surprise. The coalition ship was 50 times larger than the Vengeance. A direct collision would destroy both vessels. "Admiral," her tactical officer said carefully, "should we activate the molecular disruptors?" Morrison smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "No, I want to send a message. Fire quantum torpedoes, full spread. Target their command center." The Vengeance fired every weapon she had directly into the path of the charging bio-dreadnought. The quantum torpedoes phased through the ship's armor and detonated inside its command center. Admiral Kethavar had just enough time to realize what was happening before his ship's bridge vaporized around him. The Apex Predator, its command structure destroyed, continued on its collision course with the human flagship. But without guidance, the massive ship's living systems began shutting down. What struck the Vengeance was not a weapon of war, but a dead hulk tumbling through space. The collision destroyed both vessels. Admiral Morrison died along with her crew, but her sacrifice had achieved its purpose. The Coalition's most powerful ship and its most experienced commander were gone. Across the system, the remaining Coalition forces watched their flagship die and finally understood the truth. They were not fighting a desperate human counterattack. They were facing the systematic destruction of everything they had built. Within 6 hours, the Coalition fleet at Hegemony Prime was completely destroyed. The planet's orbital defenses were reduced to debris. The capital world itself lay defenseless before humanity's guns. But the humans did not bombard the planet. Instead, they broadcast a message to the billions of alien civilians below. "People of Hegemony Prime," came the voice of Admiral Morrison's second-in-command. "Your leaders chose to murder our children. Your military chose to burn our worlds. You are not responsible for their crimes. Surrender now and you will be treated with the mercy you denied our people." The planetary government surrendered within an hour. Across coalition space, the pattern repeated. Human forces struck with overwhelming strength, destroyed all military resistance, then offered terms to surviving civilians. The war that the EI coalition had expected to last years was over in 3 months. In the final engagement of the conflict, the last coalition fleet made a desperate stand at the Saurix homeworld. 50,000 bioships defended the planet where their species had first evolved. They faced 300,000 human warbringers. The battle lasted 2 hours. When it ended, coalition military power had ceased to exist. The war was over. Humanity had won. But the cost had been enormous. Admiral Morrison was dead, along with millions of other humans who had given their lives for vengeance. Entire star systems lay in ruins. The galaxy's political order had been shattered, and in the ashes of the Coalition's empire, humanity stood as the new dominant power in known space. They had proven that they could not be bullied, could not be intimidated, and would never forget an attack on their people. The galaxy had learned a lesson about humanity. The question now was what humans would do with their newfound power. The answer would surprise everyone, including themselves. The new Galactic Order 3 months after the Battle of Hegemony Prime, President Chen Wei-ming stood before the United Nations General Assembly on Earth. The Great Hall was packed with representatives from every human world, but today they were joined by something unprecedented, delegates from dozens of alien species. The war was over. The Coalition's military might lay in ruins across 47 star systems. Their fleets were destroyed, their leadership dead or captured, their empire shattered. Humanity stood as the undisputed master of known space, backed by the largest military force in galactic history. The galaxy waited to see what Earth would do with its victory. Fellow humans and honored guests from across the galaxy, President Chen began, his voice carrying to billions of beings throughout human space and beyond. 3 months ago, we achieved what many thought impossible. We defended our people against those who sought to destroy us. In the audience, Ambassador Feltar of the Crystalline Collective shifted nervously. His species had remained neutral during the war, but they had watched humanity's military display with growing alarm. A race that could build 800,000 warships in 6 months was not one to be taken lightly. Today, we face a choice, Chen continued. We can follow the path of our former enemies. We can use our strength to conquer and dominate. We can become the very thing we fought against. On the planet Sorix Prime, the surviving members of Admiral Kethvar's government watched the transmission with fear. They expected demands for tribute, for submission, for the complete surrender of their sovereignty. It was how the Coalition had always operated. The strong ruled the weak. It was the natural order of the galaxy. Or, President Chen said, we can choose a different path. We can build something better than what came before. The president activated a holographic display showing the galaxy. Red zones marked the former Coalition territories. Blue showed human space. But new colors were appearing. Green for worlds that had requested human protection, yellow for systems that had joined the new alliance humanity was proposing. I announced today the formation of the Galactic Protection Compact. Any species that commits unprovoked genocide will face the full military might of humanity and our allies. But those who seek peaceful coexistence will find us to be the galaxy's most reliable protectors and trading partners. The hall erupted in surprised murmurs. This was not what anyone had expected from a victorious military power. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now director of the new Galactic Relations Council, stood to address the assembly. She had survived New Eden's destruction and witnessed humanity's vengeance. Now she helped craft what would come next. The compact operates on 3 simple principles, she explained. First, the right of all sentient beings to live free from fear of genocide. Second, the protection of peaceful trade and exploration throughout the galaxy. Third, the requirement that member species contribute to the common defense according to their abilities. It was a radical departure from how galactic politics had operated for millennia. The Coalition had ruled through fear and superior force. The new human system offered protection in exchange for cooperation. The reaction from former Coalition species was swift and surprising. On Hive Prime, Queen Velthara of the Insectoid Collective spoke to her subjects through their shared mental link. The humans offer us a choice: submit to their empire or join their alliance as equals. This is unexpected. Her military advisors, what remained of them after humanity's devastating assault, urged caution. They destroyed our fleets without effort. This could be a trap to make our surrender seem voluntary, but the Queen had studied the human broadcasts during the war. She had heard the voices of New Eden's children and understood why humanity had fought so fiercely. Perhaps, but consider this. They could have simply conquered us. Instead, they offer partnership. This suggests they mean what they say. The debate raged for days across former Coalition space. Some species, traumatized by their defeat, refused to trust humanity's offered hand. They fled to the galactic rim, preferring exile to risking another conflict with the terrifying humans. But most made a different choice. The first to formally join the Galactic Protection Compact was, surprisingly, the Saurix Confederation. The reptilian species that had planned New Eden's destruction became humanity's first major alien ally. Admiral Thekmore, one of the few high-ranking Saurix officers to survive the war, addressed his people from the ruins of their former capital. Our leaders were wrong. They told us humans were dangerous aggressors who needed to be contained. They were right about one thing. Humans are dangerous, but only to those who threaten the innocent. The decision was not unanimous. Many Saurix felt humiliated by their defeat and preferred isolation to alliance, but the younger generation, who had grown up hearing stories of human fury unleashed, in righteous anger, saw things differently. Lieutenant Kesvar, nephew of the dead Admiral Kethavar, joined the new integrated fleet as an exchange officer. Standing on the bridge of the human cruiser UES Reconciliation, he watched mixed human and Saurix crews working together. It's strange, he admitted to Captain Maria Santos, the human commander. 6 months ago, our species were trying to exterminate each other. Now we serve on the same ships. Santos, whose own family farm had been destroyed in a coalition raid during the war, nodded thoughtfully. My grandmother always said that enemies can become friends, but it takes time and effort from both sides. The integration was not always smooth. Cultural differences led to misunderstandings and occasional conflicts. Some humans struggled to work alongside species they blamed for New Eden's destruction. Some aliens feared that human anger might resurface without warning. But slowly, carefully, the new alliance took shape. The Crystalline Collective joined after their scientists were invited to collaborate on terraforming projects. The silicon-based beings had unique insights into planetary geology that complemented human biological expertise. Together, they developed techniques for transforming dead worlds into gardens faster than either species could manage alone. The Gaseous Emirates, a coalition of energy-based beings who lived in the upper atmospheres of gas giants, provided crucial intelligence about unexplored regions of space. Their scouts could survive in environments that would kill organic beings, making them perfect advanced scouts for the Alliance. Even some of the hive mind species eventually joined, though the integration process was complex. Queen Velthara herself traveled to Earth to negotiate the terms. Your individual consciousness is difficult for us to understand, she admitted to President Chen during their first meeting. We think as one mind across millions of bodies. You think as millions of minds, in individual bodies, but perhaps that difference is a strength rather than a weakness. The Alliance's first major test came 18 months after the war's end. Long-range scouts detected a massive fleet approaching from outside known space. The ships were unlike anything in the galactic databases, sleek dark vessels that seemed to absorb light itself. The Void Hunters had arrived. The alien fleet was enormous, easily matching the size of humanity's forces at their peak. Worse, their technology was completely unknown. Early encounters suggested they were immune to quantum torpedoes and molecular disruptors. They seemed to exist partially outside normal space, making them nearly impossible to target effectively. The Void Hunters sent no messages, made no demands. They simply began systematically destroying every populated world in their path. It appears we have a new threat, Admiral Rebecca Torres announced to the emergency session of the Galactic Protection Compact. She had taken command of human forces after Admiral Morrison's death, inheriting a military machine designed for total war. Our intelligence suggests the Void Hunters are not from this galaxy, reported Director Vasquez. Their technology operates on principles we don't understand. Conventional weapons are largely ineffective against their ships. The crisis unified the Alliance in ways that months of careful diplomacy had not achieved. Facing an enemy that threatened all life in the galaxy, former coalition species fought alongside humans with desperate determination. The Battle of the Outer Rim lasted 3 weeks. Alliance forces threw everything they had at the Void Hunters, but the dark ships seemed nearly invulnerable. Human quantum weapons passed harmlessly through their hulls. Saurix bioships found, their living tissue drained of life by some unknown force. Hive swarm tactics accomplished nothing against enemies that could phase in and out of normal space at will. The turning point came from an unexpected source. Dr. James Park, the scientist who had developed neural interface technology, made a crucial discovery while studying captured Void Hunter equipment. "They're not fully in our dimension," he explained, to the assembled military leadership. "They exist primarily in what we might call dark space, a parallel realm that overlaps with ours. That's why our weapons can't hurt them effectively." "So how do we fight them?" Admiral Torres asked. "We need to pull them fully into our dimension, and I think I know how to do it." The solution required sacrifices from multiple species. Human, neural interface pilots would jack directly into modified crystalline collective resonance generators. Saurix bioships would serve as living batteries to power the massive energy requirements. Hive mind drones would coordinate the precise timing needed across multiple star systems. The final battle took place at Earth itself. The Void Hunters, confident in their technological superiority, brought their entire fleet to destroy humanity's homeworld. They found the combined forces of the Galactic Protection Compact waiting for them. Captain Marcus Chen, now a seasoned veteran despite his young age, led the neural interface squadron that would deliver the critical attack. His consciousness merged not just with his own ship, but with the quantum field generators carried by 1,000 allied vessels. "All units, this is Chen. Beginning dimensional anchor deployment. Hold formation no matter what happens." The space around Earth erupted in blinding light as the modified crystalline resonance generators activated. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist as two dimensions suddenly locked together. The Void Hunter ships, pulled fully into normal space for the first time, found themselves vulnerable to conventional weapons. The battle was brief, but decisive. Stripped of their dimensional advantages, the Void Hunters proved to be no match for the combined fleets of the Alliance. Their dark ships, so mysterious and terrifying before, were destroyed by the same quantum torpedoes that had shattered the coalition. In the aftermath of victory, something remarkable happened. The various species of the Alliance looked at each other and realized they had become something new. Not separate civilizations cooperating out of convenience, but a true galactic community. "We did something today that has never been done before," President Chen addressed the Alliance Assembly in the weeks following the battle. "Species that were enemies 6 months ago stood together against extinction. We proved that cooperation is stronger than conquest." The memorial service for Admiral Morrison took place on the rebuilt world of New Eden. The planet bloomed again, with crops and forests, but now it served a new purpose. It was the capital of the Galactic Protection Compact, a symbol of what could be rebuilt from ashes. The monument to New Eden's victims had grown since the war's end. Now it included the names of beings from dozens of species who had died defending the Alliance. Human, Saurix, crystalline, hive mind, all honored equally as defenders of the innocent. Captain Elena Vasquez, now an admiral herself, stood before the memorial with her mixed-species crew. They were returning from a patrol of the Outer Rim, ensuring that no new threats emerged from the dark between galaxies. "Think it will last?" asked her Saurix First Officer, Lieutenant Commander Kesvar. "This alliance we've built?" Vasquez considered the question as she looked out over New Eden's golden fields. Human children played alongside young aliens of a dozen different species, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. "I think," she said finally, "that we've learned something important. Alone, each of our species was vulnerable. Together, we're stronger than anything the galaxy can throw at us." Above them, the black memorial flag of New Eden flew alongside the banners of 47 different worlds. A reminder of the price of peace, and a promise that it would be defended. The galaxy was a dangerous place. There would always be new threats, new challenges, new enemies who thought they could intimidate or destroy the innocent. But they would find something waiting for them that had never existed before in galactic history: a unified defense, a commitment to justice, and, if necessary, 800,000 reasons to leave peaceful civilizations alone. The age of conquest was over. The age of protection had begun. And at its heart stood humanity, no longer the naive explorers who had once scattered peacefully across the stars, but tempered guardians who understood that sometimes the only way to preserve peace